President Trump's planned tariffs are not just about policy, but also politics. That's the word from some analysts today. They say the president is focusing on key battleground states, including Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wisconsin, all of which he won back in 2016. They say he will need to carry those same states again should he have a second term in 2020. Let's turn to Jesse Byrnes now, associate editor at The Hill. So this is politics, and this is supposed to resonate in those places.
Well, yeah, those are the blue wall states, the states that for years, in some cases even decades, were reliably blue. Now Trump is kind of stoking support in those areas, manufacturing bases, trying to say, look, I'm the same candidate that ran in 2016. I'm looking forward to the American worker, putting America first, and trying to stoke those same things again just a couple years away from re-election.
Does he have concerns that the people who live in those states, like the ones everywhere else, may see higher costs on products if a trade war begins?
Well, that's certainly one of the concerns that we're seeing from Republicans. Of course, the Republican Party is largely a free trade party, and the orthodoxy for years has been to push back on such steep tariffs that Trump is now advocating. In some areas, too, like Wisconsin, we see Harley-Davidson, and Paul Ryan's home state, is based there. That's one of the resources that the European Union now is threatening to impose tariffs on if Trump actually goes through with these steel import tariffs. So there are certain states and certain communities that, of course, will be impacted, and the Republicans arguing in general consumers are going to see higher prices because of that.
And corporations are, you know, they have a voice in all of this, and that often that goes right through the Speaker's office. Are we hearing any echoes of corporate America in there?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing some corporations come out pushing back on this. Of course, trade groups, the AFL-CIO and labor unions coming out in support of this and trying to rally their workers across the country in support of this. But of course, there are some executives. Of course, Trump has a lot of business ties, and many of the people in his administration, Gary Cohn, former Goldman Sachs executive who now is his top economic advisor, pushing back on these trade restrictions and trying to really get into the president's ear and say, look, this is something that's going to have huge ramifications if you go through with it. Of course, there are other voices in the administration, Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, who for the last few years have been encouraging Trump to pursue this type of aggressive strategy. So there's some definitely mixed signals even from the administration itself.
It's interesting to hear from his critics who are saying it's almost as if he's attacking Canada after the Russians attacked us and he didn't mention it. You know, the word that his own Warner used was warfare on the part of the Russians. Has there been any condemnation of the Russians, any attempt to stop the Russians in future meddling?
Well, yeah, I think that we're seeing this kind of Russia probe escalating at the same time. Trump is trying to voice and flex his control over one thing, trade in this case, guns a couple weeks ago. There's certain huge issues that he is kind of unilaterally making these announcements on or trying to voice support for working with Democrats in Congress while this escalating Russia probe is ongoing. And so we haven't seen any kind of indication from the administration that they're going to pursue those sanctions that Congress passed last year.
Jesse, do we know why not?
We don't have any real indication from the administration, you know, a full-throated reasoning why. They have worked with state officials across the country on making sure that they have provided safeguards for the upcoming elections. But we have seen some concern on Capitol Hill after the Secretary Rogers' testimony last week or 2 weeks ago, saying that Trump himself hasn't directed him to necessarily make added protections. So there's definitely some tug and pull still going on.
Jesse Byrnes, associate editor at The Hill. Jesse, thank you, sir.